Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Selling in the Age of AI, Selling with Purpose and Authenticity. We have 1 hour together with these three fine folks who we are so delighted to have at Snafu today. Dan Cavenaugh spent 33 years at Accenture building multi-million and billion-dollar partnerships. Jen Cavenaugh is the former mayor of Piedmont turned coach and consultant. Their son Jackson works in tech sales, navigating AI tools, saturated markets, and modern buyer skepticism. Together, they'll explore what relationship-based sales looks like across generations and how AI and authenticity can coexist. Let's welcome to the stage with a big snafu standing ovation. Come on up.
Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Well, they gave it away. As you can imagine, we are too tall to be the Cavenaugh family circus. And we are two of our family members shy of our usual basketball team. So we must be in the right place, which is this is here. We're going to talk about the Cavenaugh family perspective on selling in the age of AI, which AI, as you know, has transformed how we all do business, but probably no area more so than selling. Before we talk about us, we'd like to learn a little bit more about you in terms of who you chose to be here. So I'm curious to just get a quick show of hands. How many of you are thinking about moving into a direction where you'll be more involved in sales, but maybe haven't launched a business yet, or thinking about a career change in some way? So a couple there. How many have been doing this, but maybe in business less than a year? Yeah, great. Kind of that year to 4 year mark. Yes. 4 to 7, maybe. Yes. Love that you're still here working on your development. More than that, more than 7. Love it. Okay. And the rest of them have this figured out. They're doing something else. So that works. No worries. And then I'm curious, how many of you are doing this work as a solopreneur, a coach, or a consultant, but really kind of doing this on your own? Yeah. And could we talk from it? It's hard, isn't it? I hear you. That's my lane as well. How about folks who are in business, but maybe expanding, working with a small team? A little bit of that, less of that. What about folks who are doing tech sales, or not tech necessarily, but doing sales in a sales function, but in a bigger organization? Yes. Yes. Yes, we have that too. Okay, great. Oh, so that's super helpful. So hopefully you get an idea of that there's a lot of different ways to approach this, and hopefully you can get a sense that there's some other folks in the room who are on the similar journey as you. And so as you saw, we really represent all those different perspectives as well, which is really what I think made us feel like we probably have something to share, because what you're going to see today that we're going to talk about is, despite the very different lenses of how we show up in business, the fundamentals of selling and how we do this work are really the same. So that's what we're like, wow, actually, this could be kind of interesting. And there's probably no other conference where you will find three totally kind of related, but professionally unrelated people on stage. So that is what you get at Snafu. So congratulations. So a little bit about us, as you know, this is not really as necessarily a fireside chat as much as this is like our dinner table conversation. We talk about all kinds of stuff. I promised I wouldn't share some of the things that we do talk about today. Okay, but we'll get there. Yes, thank you. But so you, as our dinner table guests, welcome to our dinner. And but I really want to focus on you, because you are the ones in the trenches doing the work. You're either growing your business, you're trying to think about how you sell. But what I find is common is that you are here, as Robin mentioned, you're here to serve, you're here to give, you have amazing skills, you've got credibility, you've been doing this for many of you decades and are now potentially shifting in some capacity. And today we're going to give you a framework that we use for you to think about how to make that work easier, so that you can get back out and start doing that. Hopefully, before you leave here, you'll be thinking differently about how you show up as a salesperson. The framework that we're going to talk about is starting with the foundation that we'll get into right away. We're going to move from there into knowing yourself first. Again, Robin helped us think a little bit about that. And then moving into the other half of the relationship, which is knowing your customer. We're going to talk about how you get the meeting. And then lastly, we're going to wrap up with the most important part, which is how do you prepare for the conversation you're about to have? And that is probably the area where many people sort of like, I got the meeting, I'm having the coffee, I'm having the thing, we've got the Zoom thing scheduled, but they skip the whole part about it, which is what am I going to do to prepare? So that's where we're headed. Okay, so enough about me. So I'm going to turn it to Dan. If you would get us started. You've built your career, which is actually where we met. You built your career inside of one of the most competitive sales environments in the world as a consultant. What's the single thing that you've come back to as the lasting driver for building ongoing client relationships?
I'd say it's very simply, it's trust. Sales transactions come and go, but kind of trust is enduring. People don't like to buy things from people they don't trust, and they certainly don't buy things a second time from someone they don't. So for me, trust has always been kind of the foundational element of how I go about my work. And that's partly because naturally I'm an introvert. I wouldn't consider myself a salesperson if somebody ever asked me what I do for a living or what I did for a living. To say the word sales made me generally uncomfortable because I just never saw myself as a salesman. But yet I prospered in that field for the last 25 years of my career. But for me, it was work. And I had to use some structure to help me navigate my way through this process. So I felt good about myself and what I was bringing to the table. So I used something called the trust equation. And it's a book from the book, The Trusted Advisor. So I don't have a pretty picture of it like the other ones, some of the other sessions had today, but The Trusted Advisor frames trust in an equation. I'm a math person. It's kind of how my brain works. I'm very linear that way. So I'll kind of walk you through how they think about it. They basically look at your credibility, which is what you bring to the table, your reliability. Do you do what you say you're going to do when you said you were going to do it, and your level of intimacy. And this is really about your connection of kind of understanding not only what your customer wants, but why they want it, and making sure they feel that you really kind of understand the reasons behind they need what they need, versus just kind of checking the box that your service or your product kind of checks the box for them. The trick in all this is if you exercise too much self-interest, it really degrades their observation of your trust, how they feel about you. So it's very important, right? Not just to pretend to be self-interested. It's actually about truly making sure your customer's agenda is secondary to your own.
Sorry, I think you said that backwards.
Oh, I'm sorry, I did say that backwards.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
We're saying,
Well, there you go.
This is a lot
This
like
is what
our dinner
happens
table
when you've been
conversation.
when you're retired for 2
exactly
years.
how
This
it
is what
goes.
happens, and this happens at the dinner table too, by the way. So I really love having my
We
wife
knew
on
what you
stage
meant.
with me. It's wonderful. So yes, it's about putting your customer's agenda absolutely first. And I can't emphasize enough. This isn't about a sales technique about how do I mask being less self-interested. It's actually about not being self-interested. You don't need a sales technique, right, to be not self-interested. And I think most of us here, by our very nature, are probably reluctant salespeople. So, we're off to a good start already.
So for someone who genuinely dreads the idea of selling, I think that is the reluctant salesperson by
Anybody
definition.
else? That's me. I dread it. Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
So what does this equation give that the traditional sales model misses? It's all about the close.
Sure.
What's different?
I alluded to this a little bit before, but a lot of the sales techniques that you'll read in like the old book, Getting to Yes, they teach you how to overcome objections. But what I don't like about those books and those approaches is they're really, if you're thinking about those things, you're naturally being a bit self-interested. And I think the trick to it is actually not being self-interested and being genuine. So for those of us that are, again, naturally reluctant in sales, I found success in 25 years by being a lot more deliberate about just being what I'm good at, right? And that's planning well, being structured, being reliable, and bringing value to the table, and then trying to really connect with my customer. And I just kind of put my own self-interest to the side. And I think people and your customers are smart enough and can feel that difference. I think we've all kind of been in the room where you might acknowledge someone who's really good at masking their self-intention, but you still kind of pick up on it, which makes you trust them just a little bit less. So I think really it's about leaning into what and being deliberate about who you already are, and not apologizing for the fact that you're not self-interested. So.
Thank you. So what if you don't take anything else away from today, this is really the key that we would want you to take away from this, which is what are you doing every single day and in every conversation that you're having to build trust? And what are the things that you potentially could be doing to undermine that trust, which is, again, not what you set out to do, but it's the subtle things you do that may have that impact. So that leads us into our next topic, which is thinking about the part that most sales training ignore. It's all about the customer and getting to yes, but what we want you to start with is thinking about knowing yourself first. So Robin touched on this a little bit as well in terms of thinking about who you are and what differentiates you. The tool that we use as we think about self-awareness is the Enneagram. And it's a tool that some of you, I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram. Yes. Is anyone out there you actually know your type? And
oh yeah, look at everybody.
Have any of you actually used the Enneagram in thinking about how you show up as a salesperson? So that's what we want to talk about a little bit today. So I won't go through the whole model, but basically, if you're not familiar with it, it is a profiling tool. Oh, thank you. It is a profiling tool that helps you really think about what your worldview is, what your underlying motivations are, and how that might show up in your behaviors. How you show up under pressure, which there is no higher stakes usually than being in that call when you have a quota and you're trying to deliver, and you're thinking about that is, your family relies on that paycheck and your paycheck relies on you hitting the number. So it's really hard to think about where you are under pressure. And the Enneagram can, of course, help you think about how you show up and what your blind spots might be. So without going into the whole model, we're just going to talk a little bit about our types and how that shows up in how we perform in a sales relationship. So I'll start with myself. I'm here what's called an active controller. I'm getting this. I do have a few folks who know me who I either invited or who I've met or I maybe met at Responsive who are like, you? Active controller? I'm so surprised. There is a reason I got the facilitator role. We didn't have a conversation about it. He tried to have the facilitator role. I was like, that is not going to work. We tried for like 3 months. And finally last week I was like, I am the facilitator. So what that means for those of you who are newer to this is I lead with directness. I come in, it's my credibility that kind of walks in the room. And this isn't just me, but this is kind of what you would get with an 8 who is an active controller. So the great thing with that, when we think about the trust equation, what I usually can bring really easily is the credibility, and I follow through, I deliver on the reliability. Where my 8-ness can get in the way is the intimacy, because I'm like 3 steps ahead. I know your problem. I can already see how I can help you solve that. So I've jumped ahead, and in doing so, it can seem like I'm actually self-interested because I'm trying to get to the end. And it can seem like I'm putting my agenda ahead of your agenda and that you're not even part of this. It can be like a lot. So that's where, for me, my strength is bringing the credibility and the reliability. And what can sometimes be missing is the self-interest and the intimacy. So that's my challenge. And that's how this tool has been really helpful for me in thinking about the Enneagram and thinking about how I show up as a salesperson. So how does that look for you, Dan?
So I'm type 6. It's as a loyal skeptic. And how that kind of shows up for me is it's very important for me to be very prepared, very purposeful in almost everything that I do. You'll kind of see that bleed through. I want to be very precise, and I want to think through every possible risk and make sure I've thought of it and how to manage it and make sure we get a positive outcome for the customer. Where it shows up for me as a blind spot is I'm so focused on managing the risks and wanting to demonstrate how thoughtful I am about things that I can get myself wrapped around the axle a little bit, You probably already did see that earlier, and you're probably going to see it later. I wish I had done the Enneagram like 20 years ago, because I probably, we'd probably live in a bigger house. But I found it to be, the Enneagram stuff has actually been incredibly helpful for me and transformative. So I would certainly recommend it. Anyway, Jackson, to you.
Yeah, I'm what's referred to as a type 7 and an enthusiastic visionary. I see some fellow type 7s out there. Awesome. And what that means and how I show up is I bring a lot of positivity. I'm a glass half full kind of person, and bring a lot of energy and again, positivity, to both my professional and personal relationships. And I build trust easily. I connect with people because I'm, always looking at things in the best way possible. Areas that, that I have blind spots, because I'm constantly looking ahead, I don't often ground myself, and conversely to my dad, I don't always analyze all the risks, so I can wind up in situations where, maybe I'm underprepared, maybe it's why I'm on stage talking to you all right now. But things I focus on in my day-to-day, just active listening, making sure I understand the person I'm speaking to, their problems, and really understanding both the emotions and but also the problem at hand.
Nice. Thank you. And since we're at dinner, what you should know about a 6 is they were like, it sucks to be married to an 8. But that's a dinner table conversation. What we want you to take away from this is not who we are and how we show up, but how this can be useful as a tool for you to, again, know yourself better and specifically know how you're showing up as one half of that sales relationship when you're in conversation. And thinking about what is my natural credibility asset, because every one of these types has the assets you bring, but also thinking about how your wiring might in fact be holding you back in some way. So helpful in a tool. Dan, I wanted to turn it back to you again. Mm-hmm. So, once you know something about your type and how that shows up in your sales role, what else would you say is useful about knowing about yourself in this role?
And I think we heard Robin allude to this before. It's really knowing what makes you special. I can recall when you started out in your coaching side of the business, Jen, they said, oh, you had your coaching certificate. Now you can go out and talk to anybody, right? You can coach anybody really well. Just get out there and do it. But you found you had some trouble kind of getting started and getting off the ground. What's important is to really focus in on what is it that makes you special? What makes you differentiated? Whenever I'm running a sales pursuit, I think through what are the 3 or 4 things that are going to make me successful? Write them down. Then I step back from them, maybe for a half hour, maybe for a day. And I go back and look at them and I say, okay, is this unique to me? Or if a customer is looking at these 3 or 4 things, could they replace my name with someone else's name or my company's name with another company's name? And would they be able to tell the difference? And if the answer is no, then you haven't quite figured out what makes you differentiated. And remember, when you're selling to a customer, they're looking at 3 or 4 proposals. They don't have a lot of time. So you really have to do something that stands out. And Jen ultimately became really successful when she was able to say, hey, you know what? I was an elected official. I was a mayor. I'm trained in Enneagram profiling. These are the things that I can show people how those attributes give me kind of a unique experience, and I can bring unique value to you. So I think, again, it's just going back to know what makes you special, know what makes you different. And ultimately, I think that will lead to a lot more success.
One last thing I would add to that is as you think about showing up in a sales conversation, and this is actually something you can think about how you showed up today, in fact, which is thinking about going into a sales conversation generally with a new person or maybe a conversation with someone you know in a different context, to think about what is your natural instinct in terms of how you show up and how you generally, what is your go-to in that situation. So if you think about showing up with someone you're going to meet, maybe someone you met this morning or someone over lunch, What was your instinct? That can be a high pressure situation if you're thinking about what you want that conversation to look like. So I invite you to take a moment now and pause to think about, is your instinct to speak first? Is your instinct to listen? Is your instinct to ask questions? Is your instinct to think about your service, your product, and how you can tell them about the thing that you do? What is your go-to when you think about how you perform under pressure? Because that is where we tend to go to when we're thinking about being in a sales conversation. I would also invite you to pause, if you have a moment now, and think about, what do I know about myself? For those of you who know your Enneagram, what does that tell you about how you show up in a sales conversation? And then what differentiates you? What makes you special? What makes you the right person to serve that client or that potential customer? So from there, we want to take you from self-awareness in terms of thinking about how you're, what they say, reading the room, but also thinking about, you can't think about building credibility until you put the other person first. And what we want to move into is knowing your customer before you get into conversation. So Jackson, the one thing I've noticed, particularly in my coaching work, is that people who are uncomfortable selling become uncomfortable even faster when they're going after the wrong person. The work that you do, time management matters more than anything. It's not optional. Your pipeline efficiency in terms of how you're able to move through and connect with people is what drives your success or not in your role. So where does someone get started when they're thinking about who they should be talking to?
Yeah, prospecting is quite a doozy. It's I spent 2 years waking up every day and going into work and feeling like I was getting slapped in the face every 5 minutes. It's a lot of objection. It takes a lot of grit, perseverance to continuously push through when you're not seeing the results you want. When you're first getting started, it's important to understand you can't say the right thing to the wrong person, and conversely, you can't say the wrong thing to the right person. And there are two takeaways from that. One, you can't say the right thing to the wrong person, right? If we're talking to just the completely wrong person and we feel like we have a silver bullet, there's plenty of people out there who, no matter what, are resistant to change, and no matter what, will not take a meeting, grab coffee with you, watch a demo, right? You have to understand that, and that's part of the role is just being able to push through when you feel like you're investing time and you aren't seeing the fruits of your labor. The second part is you can't say the wrong thing to the right person, right? That's our job, is to find that person that has that active fire, right? It's easier to sell a fire extinguisher to someone with an active fire than it is to someone lounging around by their pool, right? So, our role is to find those that have those active fires, right? And I want to introduce the idea of the ideal customer profile. And these are the organizations, the individuals, the people that your product, solution, service is specifically catered to serve, right? Who is seeing the most value from my work, right? And Jeff in his last session talked about sitting in front of the mirror and talking about exactly where I deliver value, right? And having that honest conversation with yourself. And it's difficult, but that's the first step to understanding where to prospect into. And Jen, I know you spent a lot of time understanding, where your business fits into the world, where's your piece of the pie, and would love to kind of talk through how you came about your ideal customer profile.
Yeah, sure. So I think I would say, as Dan said, I got my coaching certification. I was a former mayor, have a lot of facilitation skills. So it started pretty broadly to be like, I can work with any leader or team out there who gathers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe you probably had those conversations. Oh, yeah.
And what kind of trends did you first notice within your initial customer base?
So as I started reaching out, it became, pretty clear that, the public sector, given my experience in local government, like really kind of lit up. Like if I had like a heat map, like the public sector, as well as not-for-profit leaders, local councils, boards, and particularly in the Bay Area, this is where my network is strong. So it sort of as a natural progression in that direction.
And what problems, what kind of value were we bringing to the table for these people?
So the focus for me, and a lot of these groups are trying to figure out how do we come together as a group to figure out what are our priorities and what's our strategy, what our goals are going to be. And more importantly, often thinking about the dysfunction that shows up really commonly among elected officials in particular, and in thinking about their relationship with staff. So it was sort of working on both fronts.
And in those sales cycles, who did you find you were both, working with most to, get a deal across the line to start doing work, but also who else, saw value from the work that you were doing?
So that's a really interesting question because my network was really strong with elected officials. They were colleagues of mine. We served on boards together. They were often the beneficiaries if I'm doing a local council retreat. But over time, I was really learning that, in fact, they weren't usually the decision makers. So it's usually the city manager, the head staff person, who would be in charge of identifying a facilitator to lead their retreat. So I really kind of had two different profiles of people that I potentially could be having conversations with.
Yeah. So, and summarize, as we're thinking about our ideal customer profile in this example, you'd want to be pursuing, right, city managers. And you initially thought maybe city council members might be the place to start. But if I were in your shoes, I'd want to spend, a bulk of my time prospecting, reaching out to city council members in local government, in city councils. And this would be my ideal customer profile, right? This is where I'd want to spend the bulk of my time, the bulk of my efforts to get in front of, right? And that doesn't mean we're counting out the city council members as well, but we want to understand, what's ultimately going to lead to those closed deals, and that's winning over these city managers. It's worth noting that we can still pursue those city council members, but when thinking about, our time is valuable, and we want to make sure that we're using it wisely. So spending the bulk of our time on that ideal customer profile is where you'll see the highest yield.
Thank you. Yeah. So for me, really dialing in on my client profile and then thinking about the more precise I can be is, kind of thinking about that time value equation as you're thinking about how you spend your time in both building your business and delivering value. As you think about, your outreach and where you go from here, thinking about identifying the specific person that you're talking to. I'd love to have you maybe tee us up, Dan, in terms of thinking about how do we reach that potential customer, to just get the meeting if that's what our goal is.
So now that you figured out who you actually want to talk to, you've kind of got these customers in your sales funnel. How do you go get the meeting? I'd like to talk about, or we're going to talk about two different approaches. One is just your kind of classic networking approach. And this is really thinking about it in the trust equation, is starting with people who know you, who trust you. It's always easier to start with a foundation of trust. So that's where we'll start. And then Jackson's going to talk a little bit more in detail about more effective prospecting. But Jen, why don't you get us kicked off with the networking piece?
Thank you. This to me is really interesting because when you say networking, you all did a bunch of networking already today. You're kind of networking all the time. There's networking that can be more or less efficient. And so the reason I bring this up, particularly in the age of AI, is because in my experience, this has been, I think AI has created some opportunities, and there's some things that can be automated, if you will, but the actual relationship can't be. So this is a question of really thinking about how can I be in relationship with folks? And for me, networking is the way to do that. What I like about it, especially for those of us who are reluctant salespeople, is this works for me because for me, this is about taking care of people that I already want to serve, right? I'm very mission driven. For me, I'm in this, as you can attest, I'm not a millionaire as a result, but I'm here to serve. And I think through that, my passion for service, I think my business will follow. I'm trusting that as my guiding light. But as a result, the folks that I'm dealing with are already people who know, like, trust, and respect me. That is where I start. And the key for me in networking is being in the right place. I love all of you fellow coaches out there, and many of us are spending way too much time together, commiserating over how hard this is to do. But we're likely, somebody earlier in a session mentioned that they do coach coaches, and it's great to get coaching as well. And unless your clientele are coaches, it's really important that you have folks who can support you, because as a solopreneur, this work is really hard. So having that support is essential. But the most important part is that you're finding ways to network in the places where you're with the right people based on your client profile, or with the people who know the right people. And I don't mean the right people. I mean the people that you really are here to serve. And that's the really key as you're thinking about your networking. The other thing I would say that's really important is you're thinking about how to reach out with something of value, either a connection I can make, an article I've read, an industry trend that I think I can share with you, some way to reach out. It could be that I'm here as just a thought partner. I'm not here to serve you. You don't have to pay me for my time in this case, but I'm really just here to think about what are the problems you're having and how can I help you think about having a conversation about that. So for me, I stopped waiting for a reason to reach out and looked for ways to reconnect with people. When I get into conversation, whether it's a coffee or a lunch or here today, the three questions that I focus on is, what's keeping you up at night? So really, what is that, the heartburn that you're carrying with you, the thing that you're noodling on, that you're stewing over, especially when you're dealing with C-suite, elected officials, executive directors. These are folks who might have someone who can support them on the policy level. What they often don't have is a strategic partner to help them work through the soft side, the people side of the challenges. They really can't go to their team and say, wow, it's really hard, guys, to be a leader. I'm not sure I know what to do next. Like, that doesn't breed confidence in your team. But many people who are sort of at the top in whatever the top of their world is, they don't have someone to support them. And if you can be that for that person, that can make a world of difference. And that often positions you then to be able to be of service, which is, as we've said, selling. The other thing I talk about is, what is your biggest challenge right now? Again, I haven't talked anything about me, and I haven't talked about how my thing can be a solution for you. It could be that it's not me. It could be that there's someone I know who can be part of a solution for you. So it's focusing on their problem in their own words. And it may be that I can then talk about, I actually helped a client solve that very thing in a different way. And I'd love to put you in touch with them. And perhaps that's all they need. So I'm really thinking about, again, the focus in this whole conversation is minimizing my self-interest, because my making the sale is a very distant thing on the horizon. This powerful conversation is, I think, what will lead me to that sale. And the last thing I ask is, how can I support you? And you will be amazed in a networking conversation when you ask that, how many people don't reciprocate. Networking is not about, I'm in business, I'm trying to do this thing. I just had 2 conversations yesterday with people where I asked that and they didn't ask it back. That's not networking, just saying. So that's okay, because I'm here to serve. And so how I can support you, again, it could just be a listening ear. It could be, let's brainstorm on how to think that through. And that could be it. And then it's like down the road, and if I can help you solve that, just know that I'm here for you. And that might be where it goes. And as you'll know with networking, it may not be for 6 months, for 3 years until you hear from that person. Or it may be that they know someone that they put you in touch with, which is how I got a client in Northern California. Someone said, you should go talk to this person because I think she solves the problem that you have. The last thing I would share when it comes to networking, it's actually the back end, which is actually once you've been in service, to think about how you can over deliver on expectations, because a wildly happy customer is the one who is going to be the next referral for you, which also just happened twice. Weirdly, some person heard from 2 of my clients that said, hey, I think this person should help you. And she said, 2 people just gave me your name. I think we should talk. That's what you're looking for. And that comes through over delivery. So never underestimate the power of really delivering well for the clients that you do have, because people talk. So there's a perspective on networking. And so I would pause there for you today. My next reflection question for you is for you to think about, before you leave today, 3 names of people that you haven't talked to in the last 6 months or so, with whom you have a connection, you feel drawn to serve, or you believe they're connected with the people that you can serve. Who are those people? And if you're looking for an accountability buddy, this will be free coaching. Send me those names of the 3 people. It doesn't have to be their real names. It could be a description. I don't know them anyway. It's fine. Send me those names by the end of the day. And then within the next week, let me know when you've done it, which is reached out with the thing, the offer, the invitation for coffee, the article that you were thinking about, and let me know when you've done it. The key for you in growing your business is both making the commitment to yourself, showing up and doing the work on a regular basis, and holding yourself accountable. And you're more likely to deliver on that if you have an accountability buddy. Right. So I'm here for you. I expect to hear from you soon. So with that, and that's the 8 in me, just so you know, as they can tell you, it's sometimes not that fun. Okay, so with that, that's networking. And there's a point at which your network gets tired of hearing from you, or you're really pivoting pretty far away from maybe where your current network is, and you need to reach out more broadly. Jackson, as smart and intelligent as you are, you didn't come into this work with a network. So you have some folks who are probably the right fit for your the product that your company offers, but you don't know any of these people. So when I have to reach out to people I don't know, how do I approach that?
Yeah, again, prospecting is a beast, especially cold outbound. And for one, it's a numbers game, right? You have to get you have to spread your net out there and cast a wide net. But I want to discuss kind of two strategies I take to my prospecting and the different purposes they serve. One is your traditional, high volume outreach, right? This can be automated. This is typically low conversion rates. You're not seeing too many leads come in from this strategy, but it's getting your name out there, right? It's almost serving a different purpose entirely. And again, this can be automated by AI. This is less personalized. And I probably spend 20 to 30% of my time doing this. The bulk of my time is spent on high touch personalized outreach. And this is to note, these are both, I'm wanting to reach out to, with both of these strategies to a similar amount of times, right? Not everyone's going to reply to a single message. Wouldn't that be great? But this is a very personalized touch, right? Especially in the era of AI today, people's inboxes are drowned, they're fatigued, right? So we need to do everything we can to make the reader aware that we know them, that we understand their problems, understand what they're hoping to solve, and are the solution to that. I'm going to touch on kind of the content itself in a bit, but just note I'm spending roughly like 75% of my time on that really high personalized. Every message I'm adding a human touch to, even if I'm still using AI to some degree on it.
Thank you. So I have to say, this was one of the first things I did, and this is awesome. So I decided that I needed to reach out to people who maybe knew me as an elected official, maybe kind of knew my city, but didn't know me in this professional capacity in any way. So I decided I probably need to do some work to reposition myself in my network, and to do some outreach to people, again, who probably don't know me. And so I decided this could take forever, so I should maybe do this in kind of bulk. So I'm going to share this with you because as I was starting to do this, I was like, wow, you got actual training in this. I'm making it up. You were trained in this, so maybe I should reach out. So I crafted this email. I was reaching out to city managers in the 4 closest Bay Area counties. And I was like, here's what I do. Here's all the value that I add. Here's all the problems you might have that I can solve. And so I put all that in an email, and I'm ready to send this out to the 75 managers identified. And then I was like, wait a minute, I should pause. And so I was like, Jackson, I wonder if you could just take a look and just give me, maybe just take it up a notch. How am I doing? And so I sent it over. And then how'd that go?
I threw it in a Google Doc, and it was about 3 pages long. I wanted to be helpful, and I barely wanted to read that email, frankly. I would have brought it out here, but our printer was broken. But it was too long. And
I think his quote was, he's so kind. He's really loving. But he's in Atlanta. I got him on the phone. I was like, hey, can you take a look at my email? I'm going to send it out. I want to get it going. I'm an 8. I'm doing it. Doing the thing. I was like, hey, I sent you my email. Can you take a look at it? And he was like, that was the longest email I've ever seen. In fact, I didn't finish reading it. It's like, that hurt.
Yeah, and it was entirely true. As direct.
Okay, so here's what he said. He's like, okay, don't worry. Okay. I've been trained at this. I've got you. Okay, go ahead. What'd you say?
Yeah, so there are three things I look for in my messaging, and to note, I see success in both email, LinkedIn prospecting as well as calls. Still, they're none of them are dead as much as LinkedIn gurus want to tell you. But I look for 3 things in my emails, and whenever we're delivering content to a prospect, it's always important to put ourselves in the perspective of the reader, right? What do they want to see, right? especially today, people have what, an average attention span of 6-7 seconds. How far does that get you through the subject line in the first 5 words, maybe? So we got to think of, what's our home run first hook, right? Everyone's written a story. You want to hook the audience. And what I find to work really well is to deliver on that intimacy piece of the trust equation, right? How can we showcase that, hey, I'm not a complete stranger reaching out, but I am entirely valid in why I'm reaching out to you. This is when I'll, reference, maybe we have mutual customers that we're working with, mutual friends. This is your opportunity to, showcase, why I'm not a complete stranger. And it's worth noting that with your messaging, it's important to get creative, right? People don't want to hear the, hi, I'm Jackson reaching out from so-and-so. Here's why I'm reaching out, right? Boring. Get it out of here. We want to get creative with this. So, especially as you think of how to implement your messaging, make it your own, right? That's what's important today. In the era of AI, it's easy to just, deliver what the AI gods give us, right? But apply a human touch to it. The second piece I like to see in my emails is, establishing that credibility, right? What is, and I see 2 kind of key strategies with this. One is speaking to the value that you can deliver to them. Everyone's, businesses all function the same. They want to, at its core, they want to grow. They want to grow revenue, active users. So speaking to the value of how you can deliver on that, understanding their goals as an individual, but also as an organization, right? So how can we understand what they're speaking to, show them that we know them by speaking to that value that we can deliver. The second piece is the pain approach, right? What is limiting them from accomplishing those goals, right? People have roadblocks. Speaking to how you can solve those is the second piece that I like to slot in here. The final piece is the ask, right? What are we wanting to get from this? Whether it's an intro, whether it's watch a demo, get some coffee, and open-ended questions always, right? We don't want them to quickly shut us down. We want hopefully a response. So, I think especially today, your emails can't be longer than 100, 150 words. They got to be brief, optimized for reading on the phone at this point, right? Not people are on the go. So, few helpful tips. And the final piece is follow through, right? People are busy. No one's gonna, even if someone is interested in what you're speaking about, they're not gonna reply on that first email. It's don't feel like because you haven't heard back that they're not interested, right? Send follow up, and each follow up, don't just say, hey, pop it in here, right? If they are not actually interested, that's your opportunity to continue delivering value, continuing to showcase your relevance to these people.
Nice. So there you go. So credibility, intimacy, reliability in your follow through in 5 sentences. Good luck. And you can send those emails to Jackson and he'll help you edit them.
If you can get me to read it.
Yes. Okay. So he'll be grading emails later if you want to run it by him. So the key takeaways here, thinking about getting the meeting, is, again, starting with those who already know, like, love, trust, and respect you, and thinking about, even when you're doing high volume, what can you do to be delivering more of a personal touch, because that will win over volume every single time. So we've talked about how to get the meeting, and let's talk about the most important part, which is really preparing for the meeting. So, Dan, most people walk into a conversation with a client with a rough idea of what they want to say, and it usually has to do with, here's what I do. I'm a coach and I transform people's lives, and I have a product that will solve all of your technology issues. And you have a different perspective on that. What else is there for them to consider besides what they bring to the table?
Sure. I use something called a contact plan. Has anybody here used a contact plan before? Know what a contact plan? We got one. We got one, and I know where she got the idea. I brought a plant with me here. So the way you want to think about a contact plan is, think we're back into our high school days, and it's time to write your term paper. And your teacher would always tell you, hey, you need to write an outline first. And those of us that were good students did that. Right here. Some of us didn't, and would write these wandering term papers, right, that got B's and C's, and outline person over here got the A. That's the same true with the contact plan for your meeting. The thing I'd like to highlight in this contact plan, and it's kind of one of the themes of today, is developing a contact plan that truly has, you're looking at it through the eyes of your customer. It's not necessarily your plan, it's your plan for them. And it has some basic things, but I find when you're trying to build trust in a new relationship, the little things really do matter. They really do. So I start with, well, first, a good friend of mine here in the front row developed this slide for me. So it's one of those that you can literally just take and pop right into a ChatGPT and say, develop my template for a contact plan. So there'll be a QR code later where you can go and get this stuff. I'd highly, if you're looking to just try this out, I would encourage you to just give contact planning a try. It makes a great difference, particularly people who, again, aren't natural salespeople. It provides just a little structure so you don't kind of wander through your conversations with your client. The contact plan itself starts with just the setup, the logistics. This is, again, where little things matter. When you think about the venue that you're in, where are you going to sit in the room, right? I always use the analogy of when I'm having a tough conversation with my teenage son about something that he did wrong.
Never happened.
Never happened. Right. Right. Do you want to sit across from them, or do you want to sit beside them? Right. When you're in front, it's much more confrontational. You need to think through gender dynamics as well. Like sometimes, me as a 6'4", 6'5" person, I'm shrinking. I had to be mindful of that presence. So if I'm sitting across from someone, smaller stature, that might not be the best approach. So it's little things like that. But it's those little things that either clients either consciously or subconsciously pick up on. Another subtle one is, what am I wearing to the meeting, right? Sounds superficial, but it can be really important. A lot of people go in there saying, hey, I want to look, this is how I feel best. I'm going to show up in my favorite outfit. But that's really taking a self-interested lens. And when you show up that way, kind of obtuse to the culture of the company or the person you're dealing with, you're showing that self-interest, and you're going to just degrade trust just a little bit. So when you're walking into Facebook, you don't walk in like this. You just don't, right? If I were walking into Wells Fargo, I might have this, but I'm going to wear wingtips. So it's little things. It's superficial, but I think it's really about kind of acknowledging the culture that you're in, and increasing the likelihood that people are actually going to listen to you and feel that you're empathizing. The other piece of this is kind of what's your objective in all this, and we want back to kind of knowing the customer. And a part of this is not only knowing kind of their style and their personality profile, whether they're an analytic or a driver, and how you might tailor your approach there. But it's also important to understand what their role is in the sales cycle. I think Jackson and Jen were talking about the role if you're selling strategic planning sessions, right, to a city council. Your benefactors are the city council members, but your buyer is the actual city manager, and the lawyer, right, or someone else, or the procurement person is the gatekeeper. So when you're thinking through that objective, you want to make sure that kind of your plan aligns with what's actually achievable. If you go in to talk to a city council member trying to convince them to buy a strategic planning session, you're wasting your effort. They're just not in a position to do that, and they're going to feel that too. So you're really not thinking through how they're going to react to all that stuff and whether it's going to be a productive meeting for them. The two kind of core elements of a contact plan are the teach section and the learn section. I'll start with the learn section. That's really the questions that you're going to be asking. And I would encourage you all, you write all these things down. I remember when I saw, Jen's first contact plan, they had like 18 questions. And I was like, okay, you're in the room for an hour. Is that truly realistic? Are you able to achieve all those things? So when you write that stuff down, it helps you kind of think through, really what are my priorities? And you order those in priority, and then you kind of think through, how am I going to navigate this discussion to get as many of these questions, the high priority ones, answered. So it's just a little bit of structure to help folks who perhaps aren't kind of naturally charismatic like these other two over here. The teach section is a trap for salespeople, and a lot of people think that teach section is your opportunity to make your pitch, right? It's to tell them about all the wonderful attributes of your product or your service. This is not that moment. The teach section is really your opportunity to build credibility, again, to improve, to get that kind of trusted relationship. So you're going to show them, not tell them, about ways, stories. We heard someone talk about storytelling earlier today. I thought that was right on the mark, of people that might have similar problems and how they solve their problems. And again, you're basically, your intent there is to leave a trail of breadcrumbs for them, right? So that you don't actually have to sell, right? You just have to lead them on a story, and they're going to come to the natural conclusion, right? That hey, if you help that person, right, maybe there's something there for me. And will you get there in the meeting, in that meeting or the next one? Maybe, maybe not. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. But it's again, it's the focus on establishing credibility, not through telling, but through some form of storytelling. The last piece of that is just at the end of it, create some debrief notes. There are great tools now, like if you're doing a Zoom meeting, right? You can record the whole damn thing and press a button and have an executive summary written for you. But it's important to take those, read those, process those, so the next time around you're bringing that context with you. And I can tell you, there's nothing worse. I've been in sales meetings with young sales professionals before, in the second or third meeting, and we're going over stuff we've already gone over, and the client knows it, and you can see it, and you can see the eye roll. So again, these are all little things that just subtract from trust, that expose someone's self-interest, that is ultimately going to undermine your success in the long term. So,
thank you. So I think I may have used too many of my minutes, so we don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to touch on one area, which is, as you're talking to customers who demographically might look really similarly, there's a time where they actually might be different in terms of their readiness for change. So how do you assess someone's readiness for change, and why does that matter in a sales conversation?
Okay. This is the most important part, by the way, of the whole session. I read a book probably 15 years ago. It's called Strategic Selling by Miller and Hyman. If you ever read any book about selling, this is the book, right? I've read it 2 or 3 times. I read chapters of it just to remind myself about it. I've used the principles that we're going to talk about, called response modes, in virtually every aspect of my life. Just how I do my work, how I go about selling, how I raise my children. And the trick is, again, paying close attention to how people are responding or reacting to what you're saying. We're going to begin with the most obvious one, what I call the overconfident audience member, where they don't even recognize they have a problem, right? Think of, if you have children, your conversation with your 14-year-old son about something where you can just clearly say, Dad, like, no, thank you. Like, it's not, you don't understand, right? So clearly there's not even an acknowledgement. It wasn't him. It was the other kid.
It was the other one.
It was the other one. Yeah, he's not
traveling the
here.
world right now.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about it. But no, I'm teasing. But no, it wasn't. And that's one where your prescription there is to just stop, right? Because the more you try to sell and talk, all you're going to do is dig a hole for yourself, and that person will never be a future customer of yours, because you're just not picking up on the signs. You're going to sound self-interested. The next one Even keel. This is perhaps the toughest kind of folks. This would be me, by the way. You hate to sell to me because it's like, I'm like, okay, yeah, I acknowledge the problem. Yeah, I can probably pick apart all the things that you're doing, why it's not going to work for me. I think I got it covered. They're going to see you as a threat. And that it's important to say, okay, fine. The approach you want to take there is to just slow down, right? One of my favorite sayings is, sometimes the best way to prove that you're right is to let the other person have their way. And yeah, this works like her. Time solves that problem. Time solves it, right? Because eventually they will learn that it's really hard. And that's when they'll listen to you. So if you push too hard, an even-keeled person will dig in, right? And you'll just never be able to convert them down the road. So again, it's pause, slow your roll and leave the door open to future conversations, but just stop, you need to stop selling right there or positioning and really work on kind of establishing a network. The next one is growth. These are folks who see their current reality not in line with their expectations. So you'll hear a lot of questions about I think Jackson, you maybe talked about this. You'll get a lot of questions about, tell me more. I want to understand how this works. Yeah, I had this problem. Yeah, can you tell a little bit more about it? So they're asking a lot of questions themselves as part of the process, and that's how you kind of identify they're in growth mode. This is somebody you want to spend a lot of time with because there's a real opportunity there. Trouble mode is the one where you need to accelerate. And the way you recognize someone is in trouble mode is you hear a lot of urgency kind of in their language. You hear a lot about, I'm losing money. We're completely dysfunctional. I'm losing market share to my competitors, right? These are time sensitive issues, and you can ask some questions to better understand those things. But this is the key to this is the person that wins that work is not the person or the organization that has the most elegant solution. It's not the person that has the lowest cost solution. It is the person that can solve the problem the fastest, right? I've lost a lot of work to what I consider, inferior companies, right? Because they recognize that what was important was time. So this is a good kind of life. And we talked about when do you know when it's time to make your pitch, right? Or make the ask. Trouble mode is you can do it right there in the meeting, right? And you're really focused on what are the next steps? How do we move this forward? Let's talk about the ways we can help you. That's time when you kind of just got to jump right into it. In growth mode, I think you're still building trust and you're laying out those breadcrumbs. And in subsequent meetings, what I've found, if they truly find that you're a trustworthy person, they'll take the second meeting and maybe the third meeting, and the sale will almost happen naturally, right? And that's a relief for someone who is a reluctant salespeople who don't want to make the big ask. So that's the best part of this approach, of this trusted advisor approach, is it really allows you to be a more deliberate version of yourself and still be successful.
I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up and summarize. With that, that's
5
what we
seconds.
have for you.
We were supposed
Just
to
landed the plane. So with that, I think on paper, thank you. We are at time. We are here for you. So we did want to have some time. I know you all want to take a break before you head out. We're here if you have any specific questions. Jackson's here to go through your emails. Dan's here to talk about all your client problems. You're going to send me the list of people you're going to contact. So we're here for you. And here's where you can get some information, the slides, the contact plan, our info is all available if you want to scan that. So at that point, again, feel free. You're not held hostage here. Oh, now look what you did. Oh, nice. Okay. Again, this is a family. This is what happens all the time. Welcome to our world. So we're here. If anyone has a question, if you want to go take a break, feel free to do that. We won't be offended. But if anyone does have a question, we're here. So we have a few minutes. If anyone has a situation or something that you wanted to dig into, we would love to open it up for you. Okay. Oh, yes. Jason. Yes. Thank you. Mm. Yeah. I think this is Jackson's wheelhouse.
For one, it's you need to do your homework, right? You clearly responded to emails that resonated with your pain or what your goals, and that comes down to not having a lazy salesperson, right? There's every company out there has a sales team, and a majority of sellers are lazy today, especially with AI. It's very easy to have AI write up of more of a generic but still somewhat industry specific email. And in that, second paragraph where you're establishing credibility, that's where you want to build out, the why, right? Show the person, them, show them, their problems, their pain, you understand their goals, and have a real reason on how you can deliver on solving that.
And that said, I would say where AI can help you is it can take, days worth of research and collapse that down into really, like, in minutes, get some really deep insights. Again, it's not going to know everything, but like, wow, if they've been in the news, you can find it like that, right? For local government, if local government has made the news, that's the last place they want to be. But I can really leverage that in the work that I'm doing, right? So that can help me really personalize it, as opposed to emailing 75 city managers. If I'm willing to take the time, I can spend a half an hour and craft a very carefully worded email that really nails the problem that city manager is going to have. That's the difference. But the challenge I have is time. Other questions? Yeah. So the question was, instead of saying, is this something you would be interested in? The question is, do you know someone who would be interested in X? Do you have a thought on that?
I mean, it gives them a bit of an out a little bit, if they are interested, it makes the answer, it's a harder yes. You want to make the yes as easy as possible, right? If they are interested, click this button and you'll have time with me next week, right? Now I'm asking you to brainstorm, 5 people that this might be relevant to, which is more likely to be an easier sell.
I would also say, again, being the even keel person, right? You'd hate to sell to me. I would see through that as being just kind of a transparent way of really saying, what I'm really saying is, do you want to buy something from me? And again, I would say, when I hear somebody say that, I'm like, you're being a salesperson, you're using sales technique on me. I'd much prefer that you were just straight. So, and I think the point is really kind of understanding that response mode to know when it's time to do that. Good salespeople know, right? And I learned it the hard way, right, by making a mistake a lot of times. But this book really helped a lot. So again, for me, it was very helpful. But I think there's a time for it, and when there is time for it, be direct, because you've earned their trust. So you're allowed to. Yeah, I don't.
Yes,
here,
except
back.
Robin's here,
Oh,
so
we're out of
we've
town.
got to cut it off.
Okay.
We'll still be here, so
Yeah.
feel free. We're happy to take your questions one-on-one, and thank you for being here.
Thanks.